she woke up before the sun. The light was still soft and pale, filtering through the thin curtains of the small bedroom she shared with her youngest child. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards and the soft breathing of the children still asleep. She stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulders. The result of years spent managing the farm and doing everything on her own. Life had not been easy. She had learned to find comfort in the routines that kept the house running and the children fed. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee, which she had made the night before, and she poured herself a cup, savoring the warmth in her hands. She looked out the window at the sprawling fields that stretched beyond the house. The morning mist hovered over the land like a delicate blanket, and the birds were already beginning their songs. There was peace here, and she cherished it. But she also knew how quickly that peace could be disrupted. She moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. Feed the chickens, check the animals, make breakfast, and wake the children. Every task was done with care, though her mind was always partly alert, scanning for anything unusual. She had learned early on not to ignore the small signs, the rustle in the trees, the tracks in the mud, the sudden silence of the birds. Experience had taught her that danger often arrived quietly. Her neighbors lived miles away, and the closest town was a long drive, which suited her just fine. She liked the solitude and the freedom it offered, but it also meant that she had to be self-reliant. There was no one to call in an emergency, and she had long since accepted that she could only depend on herself. That independence had shaped her, made her strong, and had hidden a past that very few knew about. After breakfast, she walked through the fields, inspecting the crops and the fences. Everything seemed normal, the rows of vegetables standing tall and healthy, the fences holding strong against the wind and wildlife. But her instincts told her to stay alert. There was a subtle tension in the air, something she could not yet name. It was the kind of feeling that had saved her more than once before, though in different circumstances. In places far removed from this quiet farm, her children played nearby, their laughter ringing through the morning air. She watched them for a moment, letting herself smile. Protecting them was the most important part of her life now, and she had built her world around it. They had no idea of the life she had led before this, no idea of the skills she had honed in places that demanded precision, calm, and courage. They only knew her as their mother, the woman who made breakfast, mended clothes, and worked tirelessly to keep them safe. She spent the day moving from task to task, repairing a broken fence post, checking the water supply, and tending to the small garden that supplied their food. Each action was simple, yet every movement was measured and deliberate, born of muscle memory and a trained mind. Even in the mundane tasks, there was a rhythm that kept her alert and prepared for the unexpected. As the sun climbed higher, a faint noise caught her attention. A vehicle in the distance, unusual for this time of day, moved slowly along the dirt road that led to her property. She squinted against the sunlight, trying to see more clearly. It was not uncommon for delivery trucks or farm equipment to pass by, but something about the movement seemed deliberate, cautious, as if whoever was inside were observing rather than traveling somewhere. She did not panic, but her senses sharpened. She finished the task she was on, then moved toward a vantage point where she could watch without being seen. From this distance, the vehicle seemed to slow near the edge of her property, lingering where the road curved out of sight. Her mind began to work through possibilities, cataloging the familiar and the unfamiliar, assessing threats without fear. Experience told her that staying calm was as important as acting, and she had learned to balance the two in ways that others rarely understood. By mid-morning, she had completed most of the outdoor chores. She returned to the house and set about preparing lunch. The smell of cooking filled the air, drawing the children inside, chattering about their small adventures in the fields. She smiled at them, listening with genuine interest, but her eyes kept drifting to the windows, scanning the perimeter. Every instinct screamed caution. Every muscle was ready to respond, though she moved and spoke as if nothing were wrong. After lunch, she took the children on a walk around the property, explaining the importance of caring for the land and the animals. They listened eagerly, absorbing the lessons. unaware that their mother's knowledge came not just from farm life, but from a lifetime of preparation for situations far more dangerous. She taught them the small ways to notice change, to respect their surroundings, and to understand the value of being alert without living in fear as they returned to the house. The vehicle reappeared, stopping again near the edge of the property. This time it was closer, and she could make out more details. There were 3 people inside, moving slowly, almost cautiously. Their demeanor suggested they were looking for something or someone. Her mind cataloged every detail, her training guiding her observations. Nothing about them seemed ordinary, and yet she remained outwardly calm. Letting the children lead the way inside, evening approached, and the sky turned shades of gold and pink. She prepared dinner, the children helping in small ways, their laughter and chatter a comforting rhythm. Yet in the back of her mind, she planned her next steps. She could not ignore the signs. She could not allow a threat to reach her family unprepared. And she was ready for the skills she had once relied on in the most dangerous situations in the world were still part of her. Hidden beneath the layers of everyday life. Night fell, and the house was quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves outside and the occasional call of a distant animal. She checked all the locks, made sure the animals were secured, and took a few moments to review her surroundings. Her senses were honed, her mind alert, and her heart steady. She had faced danger before, and she knew that fear would not help her now. Preparation, awareness, and calm would. As she tucked the children into bed, she lingered for a moment, watching their gentle breathing. They were safe for now, but she knew that could change. And when it did, she would be ready. She had built this life, this peaceful homestead. She would protect it with everything she had, just as she had always protected herself in the past. The skills, the instincts, the discipline, they were all still inside her, waiting, ready to rise when needed. She sat by the window for a long time after the children slept, looking out into the darkness. The vehicle was gone, leaving only the quiet night, but her awareness remained. She thought about the life she had left behind, the training that had shaped her, and the quiet strength that had allowed her to survive and thrive. This farm, this life, these children, they were worth every sacrifice. Every ounce of skill she possessed. By the time she turned off the lights and lay down to rest, she felt the weight of responsibility, but also a quiet pride. She had created a safe world for her children, and she would defend it at all costs. Outside, the night was calm, but she knew that life could change in an instant, and when it did, she would not be afraid. She would act precisely, decisively, and without hesitation, because that was who she was. And no one, no matter how cunning or determined, would underestimate her again. The next morning started like any other, with the soft glow of dawn touching the farm. She moved through her routine with the same careful efficiency as always, feeding the animals, checking fences, and making breakfast. Yet beneath the familiar rhythm, a tension lingered in her mind. The sight of that strange vehicle yesterday had not left her. She could feel it, quiet warning that something was amiss. Her children were still asleep as she walked outside to inspect the perimeter. The fields were bathed in soft light, the mist curling around the crops, but she noticed subtle differences from the previous day. Tire tracks in the dirt led in circles around the edge of the property. She followed them with a careful eye, noting the depth, the type of vehicle, the direction they had come from and gone. It was a quiet message from those who had passed, a signal that they were aware of her land and were testing it. Her instincts sharpened. She did not panic, for panic was useless. Instead, she made a mental map of the surroundings, noting every tree, fence, and structure that could be used to her advantage if needed. The past had taught her to expect the unexpected, to plan several moves ahead, and to remain calm even when danger approached. She knew that whoever had driven through her land yesterday might return, and if they did, she needed to be prepared. By mid-morning, her children had woken up and joined her in the chores. She kept the conversation light, directing them with warmth and patience, while her eyes continually scanned the horizon. The farm was her world, but she was aware that this world could be intruded upon at any moment. Every sound, every movement in the distance was analyzed, catalogued, and assessed. Her calm demeanor masked the vigilance within. Later in the day, a neighbor drove by, waving from a distance. She returned the wave, smiling politely, but her mind remained focused on the perimeter. The neighbor lived a mile down the road and was unaware of the small disturbances she had noticed. No one knew how important it was to be aware in these quiet moments, and she had long accepted that some knowledge was hers alone to carry. She thanked the neighbors silently for their presence. Yet she knew that real protection could only come from within. As afternoon approached, a distant sound caught her attention, a faint, irregular noise, like a vehicle slowing, then stopping, and then moving again. She moved quietly to a vantage point where she could see the dirt road leading into her property. 3 figures emerged, stepping out of the vehicle and looking around as if searching for something. She observed them without making herself seen. Their movements were careful but deliberate, their posture and gestures betraying intent. They were not ordinary passers-by. Her mind worked quickly, cataloging the details, the type of clothing, the way they moved, the tools or equipment they carried. They were prepared, organized, and methodical. She recognized the signs of people who thought they could take advantage of what they perceived as vulnerability, and she knew from experience that such people could be dangerous if underestimated. She returned to the house, calling her children inside under the pretense of needing help with chores. She spoke calmly, laughing lightly as they came running, unaware of the threat looming outside. She moved through the house, checking locks, securing doors, and quietly ensuring that the animals were protected. Every movement was deliberate, every action a layer of preparation. She knew that the element of surprise was her greatest advantage, and she intended to keep it. By evening, the figures had left, but their presence had left a mark. Tire tracks were clear in the dirt. A faint footprint suggested that one of them had walked closer to the property line than the others. She examined it closely, recognizing the type of boot and estimating the weight and size of the person who had left it. This attention to detail was second nature, a skill honed in situations far more dangerous than a quiet farm. Dinner was prepared as usual, their children chatting about their day. She listened, smiling, while her thoughts drifted to possible scenarios. She imagined the ways the intruders could return, what routes they might take, and how she could use the landscape to her advantage. Each scenario was analyzed logically and thoroughly. She was careful not to let her children see the worry in her eyes, for they needed to feel safe and secure in their home. After dinner, she stepped outside under the fading light, moving silently along the edge of the property. She looked for signs of recent activity, tracks in the soft earth, broken twigs, or disturbed soil. There was a subtle pattern, almost imperceptible, that told her these people were not random. They were observing, planning, testing boundaries. She allowed herself a brief moment to remember her past. The training, the missions, the careful planning and strategy she had relied upon in moments of true danger. Those experiences had prepared her for this moment. She was ready. Night settled over the farm, and the children were tucked into bed. She lingered by the window, watching the darkness, listening to the quiet sounds of the countryside. The figures had not returned yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. She reviewed every corner of the house, every path leading in and out of the property, and every potential weak point. Her mind was a map of possibilities, a record of all she had learned about preparation, co-awareness, and survival. She reflected on how much had changed since moving to this farm. The life she had built was simple, grounded in love, hard work, and routine. Yet she could never forget that danger could arrive unexpectedly. The people with ill intentions could appear where least expected. Her past had taught her that vigilance was a gift and that preparation was protection. It was not fear. It was knowledge and readiness. Before going to sleep, she made final checks around the house, ensuring doors and windows were secure and that the children were safe. She set small measures in place to detect any movement outside, simple yet effective strategies learned long ago. She was calm, collected, and ready. Her instincts told her that the intruders might return. When they did, she would be prepared. Even in the quiet of the night, she felt a sense of control. She had faced challenges in far more dangerous environments than this, and she knew that the same skills, discipline, and focus could protect her family here. She allowed herself a small measure of pride, knowing that her vigilance and planning had created a safe environment. Yet she remained aware, never letting complacency settle in. As she lay down to rest, she reflected on the events of the day. The farm was her sanctuary, her children were her world, and she would defend both with everything she had. The figures that had come and gone were only the beginning, a test of her awareness and skill, and she was ready for whatever came next, armed with knowledge, experience, and a quiet, unshakable determination. She had faced danger before, and she would face it again. And this time, it would be on her terms, on her land. With her children safe under her protection, the following morning, she woke with the same calm and measured awareness as always. The sun had not yet touched the horizon, and the air carried a crispness that made every breath feel sharp and alive. She moved through the house with quiet efficiency, tending to the animals and checking the crops. Every motion was deliberate, every glance measured. There was an edge to her attention now, a heightened sense of the world around her. The previous day had confirmed her suspicions. Those who had come by were not ordinary. They were watching, and they were planning. As she worked, her mind drifted briefly to the past, the time before this quiet life. She had been part of something much larger, much more dangerous. She had been trained to survive in environments that tested every part of her, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Precision, patience, and calm under pressure were not just skills. They were a way of life. Every lesson learned, every exercise endured, every mission faced had prepared her for moments exactly like this. Though she had hoped never to use those skills here. On her own land, her children played in the yard. Unaware of the tension that clung to the morning, she watched them for a moment, allowing herself a small smile. Protecting them was now her ultimate mission, more important than anything she had faced in the past. Every day she trained them in small ways without their realizing it, teaching them awareness and care for the land, while keeping the knowledge of the world's dangers at bay. She would not frighten them, but she would prepare them for safety. By mid-morning, she had begun to make adjustments around the property. She moved quietly and efficiently, creating measures that would help detect any unwanted presence. Simple things: a loose board here, a carefully placed mirror there, paths cleared in ways that would allow her to see anyone approaching. These were subtle, almost invisible, but they were effective. Her experience in tactical situations guided every decision, though her children only saw her as a careful, attentive mother as she worked. She replayed the previous encounters in her mind. The people who had come to the farm were organized. They moved with purpose, and there was a sense of calculation in their approach. They had not yet tried to force their way in, which meant they were probing, testing boundaries. She knew they underestimated her, as many people had in the past, and she intended to let that underestimation continue. It would be an advantage when the time came. By noon, she had gathered a few basic items from the house that could aid in her planning: rope, tools, and simple implements that could be used in multiple ways. She arranged them methodically, as she had been trained to do in her previous life. Each item had a purpose, each arrangement a strategy. She imagined possible scenarios, the movements of intruders, the areas where she could use her knowledge of the land to her advantage. Her planning was meticulous and silent, hidden preparation that no one outside her home could see. Her mind often drifted to the memories of training and missions. She remembered long nights in cold, dark places, learning to observe without being observed, moving without making a sound. She remembered the intensity of focus required, the necessity of controlling fear and adrenaline. Those memories were not distant. They were alive in her body, in her instincts, in the way her hands moved and her eyes scanned. The skills she had learned were dormant, but not gone. Waiting for the right moment, the children came running to her as she completed her arrangements. Laughing and calling out about small victories in their play, she hugged them and smiled, listening to their stories. Her calm presence reassured them, but her mind was elsewhere, scanning, calculating. She could sense the tension in the air like a pulse, subtle but persistent. Those who had returned yesterday might attempt again, and she needed to be ready. As the afternoon sun climbed, she continued to prepare, moving in silence and with purpose. She cleared lines of sight, removed obstacles, and created small hidden vantage points from which she could observe without being seen. Every step was deliberate, a blend of motherly care for her home and tactical precision. It was an art of balance, protecting her children while preparing for confrontation. She paused at one point, looking out over the fields. The wind stirred the leaves and the crops, and she allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply, to center herself. She reflected on the life she had chosen for herself and her children, the peace she had built, and the skills she had carried with her from a past life of intensity and danger. All of it had led to this moment, the need to defend her home, her family, and the world she had created. Later in the day, she noticed signs of activity once more. Small disturbances along the dirt road, footprints in the mud, subtle shifts in the landscape that suggested observation. She studied them carefully, noting every detail, making mental maps of potential threats. The intruders were cautious, yet their movements betrayed intent. They were testing the boundaries, and she knew they were still unaware of her capabilities. That ignorance was her greatest advantage. Evening approached, and she gathered her children inside, creating a sense of routine and safety. She moved with them through chores and meals, keeping the house running smoothly while her mind prepared for what might come. She reviewed all possibilities, considered all outcomes, and created contingencies. Her training demanded nothing less, and she adhered to it with discipline and focus. As night fell, she set additional, subtle measures around the house, placing objects that could alert her to movement, checking locks and doors, and positioning herself so she could observe quietly. Her children slept peacefully, unaware of the danger that might approach, protected by a mother whose skills were extraordinary and hidden. She felt a sense of calm, a deep confidence in her preparation, and a readiness that could only come from experience and training. She spent time at the window, listening to the night sounds, noting every movement, every small change in the environment. She thought about the people who might return, considering their possible strategies, their mistakes, and the ways she could counter them. Every memory of her past life informed her planning. The knowledge of how to move silently, observe keenly, and act decisively was ingrained, waiting for the right moment to surface. By the time she finally lay down to rest, she had created a network of readiness throughout the property. Her senses were sharp, her mind alert, her body ready. She allowed herself a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had prepared for potential threats without frightening her children. She had balanced vigilance with normalcy, training with care, preparation with love. As she closed her eyes, she reflected on the power of her past and the importance of her present. The skills that had once saved her life in dangerous circumstances now served a different purpose: to protect her children, her home, and the life she had chosen. And she knew without doubt that if the moment of confrontation came, she would meet it with precision, calm, and unwavering determination. Her past was a hidden strength, her present a testament to her resilience, and her future would be defended with everything she had as dawn broke. The farm was calm, yet a subtle tension hung in the air. She moved through the morning with the same careful rhythm as always, but every instinct was heightened. The distant sound of tires on the dirt road caught her attention immediately. She paused, listening, noting the irregularities, the crunch of gravel, the slowing pace, the pause at the curve before her property. She knew they were back. Her children were still asleep, and she made sure to keep them unaware. Every step she took, every motion she made, was deliberate and quiet. She checked the perimeter again, confirming the subtle measures she had set up the night before. Nothing had shifted, but the presence of others was now unmistakable. They were approaching, testing boundaries. Just as she had anticipated, the vehicle appeared around the bend in the road, moving slowly, as if the passengers were observing and communicating silently. 3 figures stepped out, scanning the farm with careful eyes. She noted the angles, the positions they took, the way they moved with purpose. They were confident, but inexperienced in measuring the unexpected. That confidence would be their weakness. She remained inside, observing from a concealed position, her mind cataloging every movement. The figures were closer than before, their presence audacious yet unaware of the preparedness awaiting them. She noted their tools, the weight of their steps, and the pauses that suggested hesitation. Every detail was valuable, every observation a piece of the puzzle she had been assembling. The morning sun climbed higher, and the figures approached the boundary fence. One of them bent slightly, examining the gate, testing it for weakness. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, staying calm, knowing that patience was as vital as skill. She had faced situations far more dangerous in her past, and this, though serious, was a scenario she could manage. She retrieved a few simple tools and positioned herself at vantage points that allowed her to monitor and control the area. Her movements were silent, her presence undetectable. She had created subtle traps, barriers, and observation points that would alert her if the intruders made sudden moves. It was a game of patience, observation, and precision. One she had mastered long before this quiet farm had become her sanctuary. As the figures moved deeper into the property, she continued to track them, noting how they spread out. Communicating silently through gestures and glances, she recognized their strategia, basic approach used by those who thought stealth alone would achieve their goal. It was flawed, predictable, and entirely exploitable. She had anticipated it, and she was ready. Her children emerged from the house, drawn by curiosity. She called them back quickly, but calmly, her tone gentle yet firm. She knew they could not be exposed to what was about to happen, yet she also wanted to keep the household routine intact, maintaining the sense of normalcy that would keep fear from taking root in their young minds. She had learned to balance protection with daily life, ensuring that preparation did not overshadow living. By mid-morning, the intruders had reached the central area of the property where the barn and storage shed stood. They moved methodically, unaware that every step they took was being observed. She noted their focus and their distractions, cataloging mistakes that could be used to her advantage. Her mind worked swiftly, calculating distances, angles, and timing. Preparing for the exact moment when action would be required, she positioned herself carefully. Taking advantage of natural cover and the elevated areas around the property, from this perspective she could see all three intruders clearly. One of them moved toward the tool shed, perhaps to gather implements, while another approached the garden fence, possibly considering it a weak point. The third lingered near the vehicle, keeping watch and communicating with subtle signals. She took a deep breath, centering herself, and recalled the lessons of her past life. Focus, patience, timing. These were critical. She could wait, she could observe, she could act when the moment was right. Rushing would compromise control, and control was everything. Her preparation was thorough, her awareness complete, and her confidence steady. The intruders began to split further, exploring the property in ways that made them predictable. She made her first subtle moves, repositioning items, adjusting her observation points, ensuring that every action would have a purpose. She was invisible, yet in control. Every instinct, every trained muscle, every learned reaction was ready. As the day progressed, the sun climbed high, casting shadows that shifted across the land. She used these natural changes to her advantage, moving silently and adjusting her perspective. The intruders were cautious, but not cautious enough. Their inexperience in dealing with someone of her skill level was apparent in their slight missteps. Their hesitation, their reliance on assumptions, the tension in the air was palpable, yet she maintained a calm exterior. She checked her children once more, making sure they were occupied and safe inside the house. Their laughter and chatter were a comforting contrast to the seriousness outside, reminder of what she was protecting and why. She could not afford distraction, yet she drew strength from their presence. By late afternoon, the intruders had made their way near the barn. One of them attempted to open the door quietly, not realizing that she had prepared a simple mechanism to alert her to any entry. A soft sound, barely audible, informed her immediately. She noted it, observing how they responded to the new variable, their uncertainty growing. She moved silently, positioning herself for optimal observation and intervention. Every step was precise, calculated, and deliberate. The intruders were unaware that they were being watched closely. Every move monitored, every hesitation noted. Her presence was a force they could not perceive, but would soon encounter. As evening approached, the shadows lengthened, creating natural cover that she used to her advantage. She remained vigilant, aware that nightfall could either aid or complicate her efforts. The intruders were growing bolder, unaware that their mistakes were being recorded mentally, their weaknesses cataloged for strategic advantage. She considered each possible outcome, each potential action of the intruders, and prepared contingencies. She had learned that flexibility and adaptability were as important as strength and skill. Her past had taught her to respond to the unexpected, to turn disadvantage into advantage, and to maintain control in moments of uncertainty. Finally, the intruders began to realize that the property was not as vulnerable as they had assumed. Their movements became more hesitant, glances more frequent, whispers more urgent. She remained calm, patient, and prepared. When the time came for her to act, she would do so decisively, ensuring safety and control, her children shielded from harm. Night fell, and the intruders retreated slightly, reassessing their approach. She observed silently, noting their departure path and estimating their intentions for the following day. Her preparation had given her complete awareness and confidence. She returned to the house, checked on her children, and allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. Tomorrow would bring the next stage, but she was ready, steady, and fully in control. The tension had reached a peak, and the moment of confrontation was near. Yet she remained calm, prepared, and unwavering. Knowing her past had equipped her for exactly this moment, the morning was quiet, almost serene, as the farm greeted the first rays of sunlight. She moved through her routine with calm precision, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and observing the land with an acute awareness. Today, she knew, would be different. The figures who had been observing her property were returning, and she could feel it in the air. Her preparation, patience, and vigilance would now be put to the test. Her children were still asleep. She ensured they would remain safe and unaware of the danger approaching. She moved quickly, but quietly, setting the final arrangements in place. Simple objects, subtle barriers, and carefully chosen positions created a network of readiness across the property. She had anticipated every move they could make. She was ready to respond with precision. The vehicle appeared on the dirt road, moving cautiously as if testing the boundaries once again. 3 figures stepped out, scanning the farm, their confidence tinged with uncertainty. They had underestimated her previously, and that mistake would cost them. She observed every motion, every gesture, and every pause. Her mind calculated distances, angles, and timing with the accuracy of someone who had lived in far more dangerous situations. She positioned herself in a concealed vantage point, her eyes tracking every movement. One figure approached the barn, another moved toward the garden, and the third lingered near the vehicle. Each action was predictable to her trained eye. She remained calm, patient, and silent, letting them advance while she retained the advantage. Her body was ready, her senses alert, her mind focused. The intruders began to explore more boldly. Perhaps thinking their previous hesitation had given them a new advantage, she noted their missteps, the slight hesitation before opening a door, the unnecessary noise of shifting weight, the misjudged angles of movement. Each small mistake provided her with insight and control. She allowed them to continue, knowing that her moment would come when action was necessary. Her children awoke and began their morning routine. She called them inside, keeping the tone light and casual. She prepared breakfast while keeping an eye on the property, her focus never wavering. The intruders were near, but her children were safe. Every detail had been considered, every precaution in place. She had created a bubble of security within the larger tension that surrounded them. By mid-morning, intruders had reached positions closer to the central part of the farm. She observed their coordination, noting that they were trying to communicate silently, but with uncertainty. They were probing, testing, and trying to intimidate. But they were unaware that every move was being observed, every potential advantage countered. Her preparation ensured that she retained control. She chose the moment carefully, waiting until they were sufficiently exposed and misaligned. Then she made her presence known, not with aggression, but with clarity and authority. Her voice rang out, calm yet commanding, and her movements were precise. The intruders froze, caught off guard by the sudden realization that their assumptions were wrong. She moved decisively, guiding them away from potential harm and toward compliance. Using strategy over confrontation, the situation unfolded carefully. She guided the intruders into positions where they could be contained without unnecessary risk. Her actions were deliberate, informed by training, experience, and a deep understanding of human behavior. The intruders, now aware of their miscalculation, hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They had expected an easy target, and instead found a person of skill, precision, and resolve. She kept her children inside, explaining that everything was under control, maintaining a sense of calm and safety. Her presence and preparation allowed the intruders to be managed without harm to anyone. A balance of control and restraint that reflected her training and priorities. The situation was tense, but it remained under her command. As the day progressed, she ensured that the intruders were effectively neutralized in their threat. Law enforcement had been alerted discreetly, and by the time they arrived, the situation was contained. Her observations, planning, and actions had ensured a safe resolution. The intruders were apprehended, their intentions thwarted, and her family and property remained unharmed. She took a moment to reflect on the events as her children played nearby. Still unaware of the danger they had been shielded from, she allowed herself a small sigh of relief, knowing that her vigilance and preparation had made all the difference. The skills she had carried from her past had served their purpose, protecting the life she had built. Evening fell over the farm, casting a golden glow across the fields. She moved through her routine with a renewed sense of calm. The tension had passed, the threat neutralized, and her children were safe. She checked the fences, ensured the animals were settled, and prepared the house for the night. Every action was deliberate, thoughtful, and grounded in care. As night enveloped the farm, she stood by the window, looking out over the quiet land. The events of the day had been intense, but they had also reinforced her confidence in her ability to protect her family. Her past, her training, and her vigilance had converged in this moment to ensure safety and peace. She reflected on the strength, resilience, and preparedness that had guided her through each challenge. She tucked her children into bed, letting them drift to sleep with a sense of security and normalcy. She stayed with them for a moment, feeling the depth of her responsibility and the importance of her role. Her life had been shaped by experiences that few could imagine. Yet here she was, a mother, protector, and strategist, applying those skills in a new context with care and precision. Finally, she moved to her own space, settling in with a sense of accomplishment and calm. The night was quiet, the farm peaceful, and her children safe. She reflected on the day, on her preparation, her vigilance, and her decisive actions. She knew that life could bring new challenges, but she also knew that she was capable, ready, and resilient as she closed her eyes. She allowed herself a sense of peace, knowing that the skills, knowledge, and instincts she had carried from her past were now fully integrated into her life as a mother and protector. The farm was secure, her children were safe, and the threats had been met with strategy, calm, and precision. She had faced danger and emerged in control. And the quiet night was a testament to her strength, preparation, and unwavering resolve. The story of this day of the confrontation and of her ability to protect what mattered most is a reflection of who she had become and the life she had built, ready for whatever might come next.